My name is George. This is GLLR Cars. Welcome to the channel. Today we're talking Jeep Grand Cherokee. Cherokee Limited is the middle of the tier edition. This one in particular has an 8-speed transmission and a V6 engine that produces 298 horsepower. The Jeep Grand Cherokee Sport is a vehicle that has evolved over the years when it first came out, and how it's become what it is today. It's become more of a luxurious ride, not meant to be as much off-road as some of the other vehicles in the Jeep lineup like the Wrangler and such. But this car is meant to do it in a nicer style with good looks and typical family SUV. Starting with the design of the exterior, I like the traditional grills that have those vertical lines, and now they're come out like these rectangles now on the Jeep, and started back with the Wranglers back after World War II, and they had those vertical lines, and that's evolved over the years. With a grill that has a few of these fake vents here at the bottom, but I do like the lighting. It's very narrow lights over on the top, and then the fog lights on the bottom. This has a very nice profile. I like the look of the Jeep. The hood has these lines that make sort of like a squared horseshoe that kind of expands out from the beginning of the hood out towards the outside of the hood. The very nice alloy wheels that it has in that pattern with dual spokes on each of the sides is very appealing, and it does show the brake caliper. And there is over in the center of the vehicle these curved lines that have a recessed, I guess it's like a recessed area that kind of follows the length of the vehicle, and it reaches all the way to the back of tire, where it does have like these lines that kind of wrap around the top of the tire. So it does have some very nice design cues. The visor in the back window and the overhang where the glass is, and before you reach the license plate, it does have somewhat of an overhang to that style as well. The vehicle has not made much different from what we've seen in years past, with the exception of those curves and accents over the years. It does have some accents for chrome and the door handles, and then on the wrapping around the frame of the windows, and not the pillars themselves but the windows, and as well as the rear mirrors. The vehicle does have a high profile. What I mean with that is that you do sit pretty high in it, but despite that, the vehicle has dimensions that are very competitive to all the vehicles in this segment, all the other SUVs in this segment. So not too narrow, not too wide. And why do you care? You care because of comfort. You care about where you drive it, where you need to get in, what parking lots you need to get into, etc. Taking a look at the interior, let's start with the trunk area. And if I open this hatch right here, it is a powered hatch. So all you have to do is just press the handle a little bit, and it does have a lever there where it'll open the hatch. The back is very roomy, very spacious. It does have this retracting cover, so privacy cover, that does give you plenty of space. And what I like about privacy covers for SUV owners is that if you do buy some valuables and you leave them in the car, you need to park, it does give you that extra sense of privacy for any valuable goods that you may have. Then to point out here on the bottom as well, there is a button that you can, or lever that you can pull to open up and reveals the tire that sits over there. A couple of hooks in here. You have 12 volt. Let me open this up so you can see this a little bit better. It has the 12 volt connectors, some additional hooks for hanging and tying things up like nets and things of that nature. The automatic button to close the hatch area. So it's rather hatch, not trunk. So I'm going to close this back up. Does not have a third row of seats, but for this size of the car, this is probably how you want it configured, because then the hatch area would be too small. Moving on to the interior, let's start with let's continue rather with the rear seats. The reason why it is important if you're buying an SUV, a four-door SUV, that how spacious it is for your passengers should be part of your buying decision. If you only care for a car that you're going to be the only driver and you don't care about the passengers, then what buy an SUV or a four-door vehicle for that matter? So let's look inside. I have the front seat configured for my height, for my driving height, and if I sit here, my first impression related to the space is that my knee space is not as big as I would think for a car of this size. My knees are barely 4 inches away from the back of this chair. It does recess in so your knees can fit in here, but it is surprisingly smaller than I expected. The seating comfort, however, is quite good. So if you're in the back and you have both the backrest over here and you have the armrest here in the center console, which also doubles for a third passenger there, I do like this for driving comfort. And with the cup holders there, it makes it very practical. The other thing that I like here is that if there is another passenger, you do have the headrest that does retract for better visibility for the driver, and if somebody's going to sit here, you get that headrest. The last thing that I like to point out about the back is that you do have in the center area a couple of air conditioning vents, but there's heating seats for both sides of the passenger as well as USB connectors. So a little bit better in that regard. Moving on to the front interior of the car, I got the seat set up for my driving position, which is recessed back quite a bit, and the controls are somewhat reminiscent of those of the Corvette, where the controls on the sides are analog, but the one in the center is a digital control. So starting the car out, pressing the brakes and pressing the start button, you notice that the center screen is the one that puts an LCD analog display that is LCD driven. So very reminiscent in that regard. This is changeable, but not the gauge itself. The gauge remains in analog form, but with the control buttons on the left hand side of the steering wheel, you can control what's in the center of that LCD screen. So it can go from music to messages that one may have. You can do screen setup here, where you get to put compass and things of that nature. So very customizable in that regard. It also has information on trip, for instance, average miles per gallon and things of that nature. You can look as well as the other gauges that you would like to see, not maybe on a regular basis, such as the temperature gauge for the transmission. I got to go back to that one. Temperature gauge for the transmission, temperature gauge for the oil temperature, for the oil pressure, and then the oil life and things of that nature. So very customizable. You have a center screen that has the very popular Uconnect from all of the Dodge vehicles, that not just Dodge but Chrysler vehicles as well, and Jeep, which are owned by FCA, have this very customizable screen where the icons on the bottom can be moved, or you can move them around and you can put a shortcut to them by putting them in this dock area. But it's very customizable. It gives you a great deal of control. It has Apple CarPlay, it has Android Auto, you can put heated and vented seats. You have things like the owner's manual or the user guide, the vehicle user guide in electronic form. You have heating steering wheel, you have the climate controls, the seat controls, the audio settings, the phone settings, the media settings, and it goes on and on. I'll cover these in another video, but needless to say that it is a very functional system. I know many folks that don't like it. I rather have something that has many features and not need them all than not have enough features and me wanting more features. So I'd rather go with that. I like the fact that it does have analog controls for your temperature controls and a few other shortcut buttons like sports mode, eco mode, the automatic on and off, the parking sensors on and off, and the traction control. If we look at storage space, 2 cup holders here, a small storage area here. This is a center console that has the deeper hole with all the junk that I have in there, and then there's 2 buttons here. So if you press the bottom one, it opens that. If you press the button that's on the top, it's only going to open the top portion, which leaves a smaller cubby hole or a smaller center console for smaller papers and items of that nature. The same thing can, or not the same thing, but a very generous glove compartment. In the center area, there is a retractable section that has another connector for 12 volts, a couple of USB-C connectors, an auxiliary connector, and by the way, this is where you connect for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Looking at the top of the vehicle, you have the sunroof controls, the parking garage controls, and your light and dome controls, as well as a little area there for your sunglasses. What I do like about the sunroof is that it is a very large sunroof. It goes almost all the way to the back, and it uses the concept of just having like basically a cloth that covers where the glass is. So it's basically a glass roof, and all you got to do is just retract that. So if I press that, it's just basically a didn't go all the way back, but if I press it, it go all the way back. It's similar to what you see in some other products like Mercedes products, and you see it in some other vehicles like that. Something that I like to point out, and is something that Jeep got this right, and I think it is very practical, is the buttons that are right behind the steering wheel. So when you're driving and your driving position has your hand there, right behind there, I'm gonna look right there, there's these buttons that are toggle buttons up and down. So on the left hand side, it will move from one station to the next. The other thing I like to point out is that circular button right there in the middle, and this is the part that I like even more. Besides that, when you press those, it will toggle between your favorite stations that are already programmed on your radio. The same can be said about the buttons on the right hand side. So on the right hand side is your volume up and down. So again, your driving position behind the wheel is here, so your fingers will naturally just move to that place. But then this button in the middle, this circular button in the middle, what it does, it changes to the different station sources, from AM to FM to satellite and so forth. So again, very functional and very practical because of the driving position. And you don't have to, in other cars where it's up here in the front of the steering wheel and you have to look at it with your thumb. In this case, you don't, it's just naturally there. And if you do drive similar to the way I do, which is usually the 3 o'clock and the 9 o'clock position, your hand is already there. First impressions, starting with the acceleration, is that it has a very slight amount of punch, but not enough for the weight of this vehicle. So it makes sound when you punch it, and it takes you there eventually, but it doesn't have that feel that you punch it, and it punches you back. It is somewhat heavy, has a V6 engine, but it could use more power, maybe turbocharge the engine or put somewhat more power on the engine. The other impression is related to the stiffness of the steering wheel. So the steering wheel does have a good amount of stiffness when you move it, so it doesn't have a lot of wobble from side to side. Having said that, it's not as mechanical feeling as some other steering wheels, so it's not like you know exactly where the tires are when you're moving it. The ride is very good, it's a very comfortable ride. However, the seating and the comfort isn't. For seats that are very well finished in leather, and for seats that they recess in to contour to your body, they don't feel as comfortable as they look. And it's something to do with the lower back position. It's very stiff. It does have lumbar support, but it is very, very stiff. So you punch it. Makes a good deal of sound, but even though this car is in sports mode, it doesn't quite feel like it punches you back. I do like the visibility in the car, the view out of, and I have the chair lowered all the way down, but the view out of the windshield above the steering wheel and over the hood, it is a commanding view. There really is no obstruction. You can see all the way down to the ground very easily. The view around the pillars is actually quite good, and with the sunroof open and the rear glass size, which is generous, it is very, very visible. You get good visibility all the way around. Your mirrors are a decent sized mirror. Both sides, the mirror on both sides, as well as your upper rear view mirror. So good visibility in that regard. For some people, the visibility of the car, it is a make or break when it's time to purchase a car. And if that's a decision for you, then this would pass that test. This would check that box. On the plus side, because it feels stiff, it doesn't rattle, it doesn't shake, and is relatively quiet for an SUV, even at highway speeds. So I do like that. What I don't like is that it is underpowered for the weight that it has. It should have more power to have the pleasurable driving experience that one would want, especially in a car that is north of $40,000. When we talk about power and we talk about comfort, it would not be my choice. It may be the choice for others. It is not a bad vehicle. If you don't care about power, if you don't care, if the comfort, you're not as picky as I am, I guess, then it may be a car for you. All in all, it's not a bad car. It is a car that has a good purpose. It is a car that's been successful over the years. And it's a car that continues to do well simply because it is that heritage, that Jeep heritage that has sold very well. Do beware that when FCA took over Jeep, some Jeep brands, some models are really rebadged Fiat models. So do have to be careful about that. So you can take a look at the platform in which it's built on and see if it's the platform that you desire. The SUV segment is a very competitive segment. As such, more and more SUVs, more and more brands, in order to compete, they add more features, and this is no exception. We've seen how many features they've added to this car to add somewhat more luxury, and add a lot more connectivity, for instance, and give you a car that does look. It's a very good looking car. I like the car, how it looks, and if that is important to you, that's something to keep in mind. The Jeep brand is a very iconic brand. It's been around since the times of World War II, when the first Jeeps were being used by the military, and that brand and that heritage has carried on, not just with the likes of the Jeep Wrangler and such, but the Grand Cherokee. The Grand Cherokee was not around then, but it's a good car. It was built to do what the other cars don't. So when the off-road capabilities of the Wrangler were there, but the ride was not quite as comfortable, it felt a little bit rugged. Well, they built the Grand Cherokee for the opposite, where comfort is more important, but it may not be as rugged, it may not be as outdoor-like and off-road-like vehicle. It was not meant for that, and you need to know that when you're making a buying decision. My name is George, this is GLLR Cars, and as always, drive safe.